All right, everybody, welcome back to another episode of Broadband Heroes, the podcast where we talk broadband, pretty much everything, and we, no holds barred, just have great conversations with really smart people. And today we have, of course, some really smart people and broadband heroes along to boot, even though one of the heroes here we're going to talk to is a Cubs fan. I'm just saying.
You won last night in extra innings.
I'm just kidding. All right, well, before we get started, let's do some introductions. Joey, why don't you just introduce who you are, and then we'll go from there.
Sure. Joey Wender, Executive Director of the SHLB's Coalition, Schools, Health, Libraries, and Broadband Coalition. And it is true, I am a lifelong Cubs fan.
Awesome. Well, welcome. And of course, my cohort in crime, Miss Jade, is here along with us to keep us honest on all things broadband policy and advocacy. So thank you, Jade, again for being here.
Thanks for having me, Nick.
I'm
happy to talk with Joey anytime. He's one of the cool kids.
He is one of the cool kids. I did look. I mean, yeah, the Cubs, they're in first place, right? 14-10, something like that.
Yeah, it's first place is the best place to be. So everybody else is below us in the division.
Well, Joey, you have quite the distinguished career, and there's a lot going on in the broadband space right now. We were just actually in Iowa and talking to a lot of folks about what's happening in this space. But before we get too far into that realm of discussion, how the heck did you even get into the world of being a public servant? I guess let's just start there.
Sure. Great question. Cubs jokes aside, really appreciate you guys having me on the call today. I've been a public servant my entire career, right? I didn't fall into it. It's what I always wanted to do. When I graduated from law school, I came down to DC with only one goal in mind, and that goal was working on Capitol Hill. And I was fortunate to start my career on the House Transportation Committee, working on infrastructure projects under the then Recovery Act of 2009. And in 2011, I joined Congressman Ed Markey's office at the time. He was still in the House as his legislative director. And he became senator. I became a senior advisor, and I stayed with him for 10 years. And, after Biden won, I was very fortunate to be, called from the bullpen to join the Treasury Department and run the $10 billion Capital Projects Fund.
Yeah, you don't always hear from people saying, I always wanted to be in public service. Like, unless you heard the bill on Capitol Hill, the song as a kid, remember that? You always wanted to be there. So I think it's obviously very admirable that you're able to go right into public service. Let's talk, for those who don't understand what the CPF really was. I think there's a lot to talk about with you and SHLB and the coalition and all that, but I do want to back up a little bit. And just for those people who don't understand what the Capital Projects Fund was and what it actually did, maybe let's break it down in the most simple language for people.
Sure. The way to think about it is the pandemic, COVID, was the national teaching moment. I'm sure all of your listeners knew prior to 2020 that broadband was not a luxury, it's a necessity. But that notion, right, that need came into such sharp focus when the pandemic started. And so Congress, in the American Rescue Plan, added $10 billion as a down payment on bringing affordable, reliable, high-speed internet to all Americans. And they called it the Capital Projects Fund. The idea is it was going to be waves on the beach. We were the small wave to hit the beach, this $10 billion investment, which was then followed, as you know, obviously by the $42 billion investment that is the BEAD program.
Was it followed, though? Too soon? Is it going to be followed, Joey?
We don't know. I mean, we think so, right? I mean, Congress passed it. It is law. BEAD is the law. I think the question is not whether BEAD will happen. I think the open questions now are, what will BEAD look like?
Yeah, I think that's why it was it's such an important thing you did to get CPF rolled out so quickly before there could be a lot of disagreements about how it should be rolled out, right? So I don't know how long that took, but let's see, March 21 is when the law was passed, right? And I think you had did you have 56 states and territories on CPF, or just, all of those were out in, I want to say under 2 years, weren't they?
That's right. We, in fact, started to approve state plans before the deadline to even submit, right? The deadline to submit was September of 22, and we started approving plans in June of 2022. I said, let's do them on a rolling basis. If states are ready, if they've submitted good materials and good plans to us, why slow them down, right?
You're sticking to the wave analogy, right? Just keep on rolling.
Just keep rolling. And by approving early states, you create not just momentum, but we created templates for other states to follow, for other states to emulate, right? I mean, the interesting thing about capital projects and BEAD, it's a state-centered program. It's not one program, it's 50, but it is encouraged. It is a good thing for states to learn lessons and to take ideas from other states. So that's why we started approving well before the deadline, so as to create models out there for other states to follow, which only further quickened and increased our momentum of approving all state broadband plans.
Let's zoom back a little bit before CPF. And you were obviously working with Senator Markey. How do you think the perception of broadband in government has changed from when you started as a public servant to now?
I would say two changes. One is there's an awareness that broadband is ubiquitous, and the notion that it is a necessity is now a ubiquitous thought. Everybody knows it. Everybody takes it for granted that, of course, one needs high-speed broadband to live, to work, to learn, to seek healthcare. I think that question is asked and answered, right? So now we're at the phase of, okay, how do you make sure everybody has that access? And also, how do you make sure everybody adopts it, right? So I would say the arc of that conversation has progressed a long way. I think the other lesson, though, too, but we're seeing it being played out right now in real time, particularly with respect to BEAD, is how much, to the degree to which these are federally controlled programs versus the degree to which states and localities have say or are the drivers in the decisions of how they invest these funds.
When the Capital Funds Project was put together, obviously it was a federal program under Treasury. What was the assumption of how much states would be involved in the collaboration?
From the beginning, it was going to be a state-driven program. I say that because it's in distinction from other legacy programs that have existed at both the FCC and at the Department of Agriculture, right? If you think about RDOF, or you think about
Reconnect.
Reconnect, these are federal to provider. Okay, provider requests money, they win the money, and the money goes directly from federal government to provider. With capital projects, the state chooses the provider, right? It's the state implementing the program. Now, they're doing so under our general guidance to make sure they're staying within the guardrails we set, but it's not the state that's choosing the precise location. I mean, it's not the federal government, I should say, choosing the precise locations or the actual providers. That's a big difference.
That's a huge difference.
I will say you were easy like Sunday morning when it came to dealing with Treasury and getting CPF off the ground. I mean, Kansas was approved in August of 22, and the money was out the door by January. Those projects are done. They just finished up field validation on like the last one. So really had a huge impact. But you shifted, I mean, it's a pretty big shift over to public interest group, right? SHLB. So how did that happen? And what does SHLB do? And what are you doing now that you're over there?
Thank you. And first of all, I should say, Jade, credit to you and all of your work in Kansas, right? The reason why we, approved you so fast is you provided a very good plan, right? And we didn't second guess. You could see this tension being played out right now with respect to BEAD, which is, yes, if we all got in a room here in DC, we might want to make tweaks to X or Y of a state plan. But we decided from the beginning that if the plan fit our rules and fit our requirements, it wasn't our job to second guess. We trusted you, Jade, right? Or whoever the state was. We said, great plan. You fit our rules, you follow our rules, go. And so I think in the end, in aggregate, the results are going to be far more positive than if the feds chose every single location or every single provider. The result will be far better. The pivot to Shelby, great question. So, it was time for me to move on from the federal government for obvious reason. We had a change in administration here in DC. For those of you who
I noticed.
have not watched the news ever, Shelby was an easy, natural fit. Ed Markey, Senator Markey, was one of the fathers of the E-rate program. E-rates, right? E-rate is one of the programs that Shelby members care most about. E-rate provides a discount for schools and libraries to connect to the internet. It was part of the 1996 Telecom Act. And so when Shelby's founder, John Windhausen, who founded the organization 16 years ago, said, I'm ready to move on, right? I'm ready to hand it off. Immediately I put my hand up and said, yes, I would love to work on E-rate and rural healthcare and USF generally. And so that's how I landed here.
That's amazing. That is amazing. And it's such a timely topic because USF is coming under fire, although seems to be on a little bit stronger legal foundation than it was assumed a month or two ago. I know you've been doing a lot of advocacy work around USF, but I do think we have a tendency in this industry to throw around all of these acronyms. And some people, even who have been in broadband for a long time, don't know what USF is. So what is it? Why is it important to your members? And what kind of advocacy are you doing around keeping it?
Absolutely. Well, thank you. We should have a no acronym rule generally in life. USF is the Universal Service Fund. The Universal Service Fund was, in short, created in the 1996 Telecom Act with the goal of bringing universal service to all points in the United States. It has had a major impact in closing the digital divide for millions of Americans around the country. USF, the fund, consists of 4 programs. I'll talk more at length about 2 of them: E-rate, rural healthcare, which is what my members care most about. And then there's the high cost program, which is bringing connectivity to some of the most rural areas in the country, as well as the Lifeline program, which is helping to pay for mobile phones for low-income residents in the United States. E-rates is literally a discount. It is help for school districts and libraries to help pay the bills to connect to the internet. The whole idea is, why should a kid from a low-income neighborhood be disadvantaged versus a child in a well-off community from a school district that could easily pay the bills to connect to the internet, right? And so the discounts that schools receive is completely tied to the amount of kids in a school district that are eligible for school lunch, as a terrific measurement or proxy for the relative income level of the school district. And the discount can be anywhere between up to 90% and down to 20%. There's also the rural healthcare program that helps rural healthcare clinics, again, pay their internet bills and pay rates that are comparable to their urban counterparts. It's not hard to understand why you need services out in rural areas, and particularly why they have such great bandwidth requirements, because oftentimes specialists, doctors, are not in rural areas. And so these rural clinics are connecting in to urban hospitals, right? Whether it be for heart issues, whether it be for any type of disease, right? And these are, when people say this is life-saving stuff, like it's absolutely life-saving stuff. And so that is the Universal Service Fund, in particular, E-rate, and the rural healthcare program.
But it's kind of a mess right now, USF, and like the contribution portion of it. And honestly, I think a lot of people in the industry, whether they receive it or not, know that it needs to be reformed. But I think there's a working group in Congress that hasn't done much on that front. Is that correct?
I'll correct some of your language. I wouldn't call it a mess, right? Not a mess. Look, the problem with the USF is that the contribution base is shrinking. You didn't ask me where the money comes from. The money comes from a fee assessed on phone bills. Well, less people have phones and more people have internet access subscriptions, right? The amount of people with phones is going like this. It's shrinking. Therefore, the contribution rate, essentially the percentage of the bill, the percentage, of your fee on a bill keeps going up in order to pay for all the activities of the fund. That is not sustainable in the long run. We agree. SHLB agrees. And that's why it needs to be a more sustainable fund, but we need to make sure it's predictable, sustainable, and long-term. That's why we should be thinking about, do we assess a fee on broadband internet access? Others are talking about the edge, cloud, enterprise, ads. It's time for Congress and the FCC to have a healthy conversation about how do we make sure the fund is on better financial footing, not just for years, but decades to come.
So how does SHLB play? Like, where do you see yourself in the flywheel of all this, of trying to get things moving to all these people?
Sure. Well, right now, there's a very real and present danger to the USF. And it's that there was a circuit split between courts in which there was one circuit, the Fifth Circuit, that found the USF unconstitutional. Okay. So we just argued in front of the Supreme Court a few weeks ago. The question is the USF constitutional? Now, we think that argument went well, but you don't know for sure until the Supreme Court actually rules, which they will in June or early July. And then assuming we win, right, the conversation then goes back to Congress. Jade, you referenced a working group. There was one with Senator Thune and Lujan. Senator Thune is now Leader Thune. And so the assumption is that will be Senator Fisher and Senator Lujan, right, the chair and ranking of the subcommittee. And, we want to work with them. In fact, we had a fly-in last week where we had, again, 37 members come to town. And we met with those offices and many, many others, over 70 meetings. And our message is simple. This is important. This is important to your constituents. So let's not wreck the fund. Let's strengthen the fund and preserve it and protect it for decades to come.
Yeah. So who are your members? Are they all anchor institutions?
That's a great question. You should be. So we'll talk about that after. It's a great time to put someone on the spot, by the way. We have over 300. By the way, you completely teed that up for me to say.
I know.
Yeah, you walked right into that one. We have over 320 members. So our members range from small school districts and libraries and health clinics to some of the largest providers. And then everybody else, inside that ecosystem that benefits greatly from E-rate and rural healthcare. And really overall, the need to have anchor institutions in communities. I mean, I like to say these are the heartbeat of our communities. It's where we learn, it's where we gather, it's where we seek care. It's I'm sure you two probably have memories of going to your local library. They're still important. They are still important, if more than ever in 2025.
My husband's on the library board here in Lawrence, Kansas.
Beautiful. There it
We
is.
spend a lot of time at libraries. Yeah, we're library people.
Reading as much as you possibly could, and I would get if you read, I don't know, like 100 books or whatever, and you got a coupon to go to McDonald's to get a Happy Meal. That was
There you go.
it was motivation at the time, just to just be.
Yeah, we had Book It, where you got the pizza from Pizza Hut, like the the personal pan pizza if you read so many books. So plied us with food. That's what they did in the 80s.
I'd be curious from SHLB's the message, external messaging, like how important libraries really are, because I think there is so much. We talk a lot about broadband, we talk a lot about infrastructure, we talk about we don't always get into we talk about the how, but not the what. Like, what are you actually doing? And I think that's an important distinction, especially with trying to get people. I mean, most of the average American doesn't really care about the infrastructure of the internet at all, right? They just want access. With your members, I mean, how do you approach trying to get your members to support that advocacy of what you're doing?
Oh, you just have to give them the opportunity to do it, right? I mean, these are members, these are people that have chosen, right? They've made professional decisions to work in these fields. So for instance, our first fly-in was this month ever in SHLB's history.
Wow.
We had an incredible turnout of people. Again, people flying in from around the country because they care. Librarians care. Educators care. People that work in health clinics, they care. These are mission-driven institutions. So actually, it's quite an easy sell to tell someone, this thing is under threat. We need help. We need you to come to DC and tell your story. I mean, I feel like that's mostly my job, is to create a platform or a venue to lift up those voices, right? My voice, I work in DC, right? The more powerful voice is the educator, it's the teacher, it's the librarian, it's the nurse, right? That's the powerful voice about why the internet is so important to their institution and why they can't do what they do without it in 2025.
You've obviously been in this realm for a while. Like, is there a story or something that just truly gave you perspective about how important broadband access really was?
Yeah, I mean, it's the low-income resident that walks into a library and says, I don't know how to apply for a job. You guys take for granted. You probably have, if you each counted how many devices are in your house.
A lot.
Over 25.
Wow.
And you could easily, your digital literacy skills are incredible, right? You take that for granted. But think about how daunting that might be for someone who just came to this country and is looking for a job. Or think about a senior who lives in a rural area who needs to see a specialist for whatever reason. To be able to have to not drive 6 hours to see that doctor and to zoom in, I mean, literally via the internet, is so powerful, and something that I think so many people, they don't even think about it because they take it for granted.
I'm going to shoot through a couple of questions just as Jade knows. This is my lightning round of fun topics. So just top of the mind, kind of first thing you think of. So if there's one policy change that you were king for a day, you could just say, bam, I'd like to see this policy change with broadband funding. What would it be?
What would be the one thing?
Yeah.
I mean, I would expand the contribution base, right? I would immediately expand the contribution base so that.
Would you do it on the bias, or would you do it?
I think we have to have a conversation about it, right? I think we have to make sure that it makes political and economic sense and it's easy to implement. But I would do it, right, once there's agreement and consensus.
All right, that's good. That's a good answer. All right, so my next lightning round question would be, what one state or community do you think that has really impressed you with their approach to broadband deployment?
Aside from singling out Lawrence, Kansas, I don't want to single out a specific community. I think it is amazing as I'm talking to my members and as I was talking in my previous job at Treasury, there's so many incredible things happening around the country. Incredible.
You have a lot of perspective on deployments of some of this stuff. So there's a lot of debate around fiber, fixed wireless, satellite, hybrid. What's your hot take?
Here's my hot take. If the federal government is going to spend all this money on CapEx, we should be spending it in a way that lasts a long time, right? You don't want to have to come back in a few years and say, that needs to be upgraded, or the technology is advanced, this doesn't work anymore. And so I think that's the North Star. That's what we're trying to strive for. I think it's clear that fiber is an excellent option for a lot of places. It does support very, very, very fast speeds, a lot of capacity. And so I think fiber is a very good option for a lot of places in the United States. I also think that fixed wireless has a role as well. I think any terrestrial-based network, whether it's fiber to the home or whether it's fixed wireless, can achieve very, very fast speeds and have strong capacity. I also think that there is a place for satellites, right? For places that are just really far from anything else.
Yeah.
Right. I think you need a balanced approach. And I think that one where states are making reasonable decisions based upon, modeling and based upon what bids they're receiving from providers of what that healthy mix is between fiber, fixed, and satellite.
That's such a political answer.
That's what I was thinking. Like, okay, all right, let's see if this was a non-political response to it. So what's the common misconception about broadband policy that you would like to correct for people listening or watching? Because there's a lot of misconceptions, clearly.
I think the misconception is the difference between CapEx and OpEx, right?
That's a great one. Yeah.
So thank you so much. So I think there's a notion that once we spend the $42 billion for BEAD, we're done. We're done. It's over. Well, that's not true. You also need ongoing support to make broadband affordable. I mean, E-rate is in many ways affordability program.
Yeah.
And making the bill affordable for school districts. The same way ACP, which has now gone away, which is the affordability program for individuals, was helping make it affordable for individuals. Like, we would like to see some type of affordability component come back. I think that's important to facilitate adoption. And so, like with everything, with every policy debate in DC, things get conflated, right? Things get simplified. Oh, we're spending all this money on broadband. Isn't it enough? And it's like, well, you have to peel back, peel it all back and say, well, actually, E-rate has its own function, right? Lifeline ACP has this benefit. Rural healthcare has this benefit. The high cost program has this benefit. And so it's not as simple to say, yeah, it's done. We're done.
It's like saying you hire a bunch of baseball stars for a team and then you're done. You don't ever have to spend any money after that.
Are you a Dodger fan? Is that where this is going here?
No, actually, I'm a Braves fan, but
okay, well,
yeah,
they're not doing very well.
No, I know. Yeah, no, I like the Cubs too.
That's right. Although by the time
I'm a baseball fan, so
I've completely jinxed myself, right? Because by the time this airs, we'll be in third place or something.
We're gonna have to edit it quick.
This is terrible. I feel the baseball gods are looking at me and smiling and saying, Joey vexed the season for the Cubs.
That's a good answer though. We usually don't have people talk as much about the money part of the OpEx CapEx. I think that is a huge misconception. And I think in all seriousness about what it takes to do things, I think it's easy to get caught up in big numbers.
Totally.
It's very easy. And you don't look at how the longevity of an investment. Like if you looked at it from an investment portfolio versus the way we look at it now, you'd have a different view too. So
and I don't think you should, maybe this is not the best thing to say, but closing the digital divide, that's an elusive goal. It's not as if, once we're done with capital projects and BEAD, we're done.
Yeah,
Nothing to see here anymore, right? Like that's not true. These are ongoing missions, right? These are ongoing struggles. Closing the digital divide is not just about bringing access to everybody. It's having them adopt it. It's teaching digital literacy, right? It's all of these things. And we're not there. We got so much more work to do. And so I think people want to simplify it and say, victory, success, check, as Jade said. But you have to look at the long run about how are we continuing to make progress and incremental change to improve the lives of all.
Well, and I think that was what the Digital Equity Act was intended to make inroads into.
That's right.
But, I'm curious about your take on this. It too is a law that can't just go away without passing another law, I think. But how are your members reacting to that? Libraries were going to be a prime target for a lot of that digital equity funding.
Yeah, we're fighting for that funding. We feel strongly in digital equity funding. We say that, as you're saying, anchor institutions is where a lot of digital equity efforts happen.
Yeah.
It's actually where that work happens. And so we agree with you. It is a law. It is a law, right? And it's one, and the executive branch is supposed to execute laws passed by Congress. I think it's going to be a fight. It's going to be a struggle, and we're not going to wither. We're not going to back down. It is important that money be spent for the good that it was intended for.
Yeah, it's kind of disheartening that those plans were all put together and kind of informal promises made with these plans that'll never have. They'll never see the light of day from an implementation standpoint without that funding.
Yeah, that's why there's so many, and we partner with NDIA. I'm going out to Cadet Inclusion next month. That is an important component, an important part of our mission, right? So I think there's a lot of work for us to do right now in DC.
For those of our listeners and viewers that are actively involved in broadband initiatives, what can they do to help Shelby in the mission to continue to advance that digital equity that we all so much believe in?
Well, I always have to have a commercial. We need more members, right? Shelby is always looking for more members. If you care about anchor institutions, schools, libraries, health providers, become a member, right? Our advocacy is so important. I don't think it's ever been more important than at this critical time. And so we want you to join us.
And this may be a tough question, but I mean, there are obviously the broadband has become political, and when it really shouldn't be.
It should not be.
It shouldn't be. We need a unified voice, a unified effort to make this all happen. So, is the message different on different sides of the aisle to try to come together to really, even to Jade's point, like to see how important schools and libraries are?
For our fly-in, it was not a different message for D's or R's. It was very clear and very simple. Your constituents benefit from this. Here are educators from your states. Here are librarians from your states. And I will say the vast majority of offices, members and staff go like this. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I agree. I agree. Because they all went to school, right? Yeah. They all went to libraries. They understand the need for healthcare. This is very basic. I thought it was beautiful during the oral arguments. I got to sit in the oral arguments at the Supreme Court. Justice Kagan, I thought, did a really terrific job boiling it down when she said, this isn't radical stuff that the Universal Service Fund is paying for. I mean, this is basic necessities. Internet access, this is what everybody needs, and we all benefit from it as a society. She kept bringing up a person who lives in North Dakota. She must have mentioned it, 5 or 6 times, how the person in North Dakota in the rural area needs to be able to contact me, but it also benefits that I can contact that person as well. This is some really basic stuff, and almost everybody goes like this. Yeah, you're right. We should protect this.
Yeah, it just needs that constant top of mind awareness and get in front of them and say, like,
constant.
I don't know how we went down this road where this became political, but it's not political.
No, you have to keep re-educating people over and over again.
And that's why you live in DC.
That's my job. That is the job.
It's Joey again.
Yeah, here I am. Oh, Joey.
Well, congratulations, obviously, on the new role. I think we definitely need more advocacy in this realm and to try to bridge that gap. So, I mean, you definitely are a broadband hero in our eyes, and all the work that you've done so far. And then we're really looking forward to what you're going to do now with SHLB. We, of course, obviously are supportive of anything that can get more broadband to Americans. I mean, at the end of the day, that is the goal. And I like what you said about the digital equity. What does that really mean? Because I do think people think of it as a checkbox. And I think maybe we need to reframe it. It's not just going to be done all of a sudden.
Anyone who gets a new phone knows it's a constant battle to learn these things and to keep that knowledge fresh. It's evolving so much more quickly with AI, and we don't want those gaps widening.
I think someone made a great point on a panel recently who said, if we want to be prepared for AI, we actually need greater bandwidth and broadband in our schools, right? Like, are we prepared for the 21st century? Everyone keeps talking about AI, and it's true. AI is going to be a major part of our lives. Well, let's get ready for it. It relies on high-speed, robust broadband internet access.
Yeah.
Well, Joey, thank you again for coming on, to spending your time. I know you got a lot going on, so we really appreciate it. For those of you listening, you can obviously see us on Spotify, YouTube, and wherever you watch your podcasts or listen. So I look forward to another episode of Broadband Heroes in the future. Thanks again, everybody.
Thank you.